Our next guest that we have with us on the show is Ed Thompson. He is, wait, I'm going to pull up his actual bio. He's the founder and CEP. I don't even know what a CEP is, so he's going to have to explain that to me, of Uptimize. It's the leading global expert in neuroinclusion in the workplace. This is a new word for me, neuroinclusion. I like it. He is also the author of a new book, A Hidden Force: Unlocking the Potential of Neurodiversity at Work. We need this in our lives. We're going to talk about the book and what he's got going on. Let's welcome him to the program. Ed, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and Ed has a wonderful accent. This was not disclosed to me before. Ed, where are you from, Ed?
Well, I'm from London, now based in Denver with my American wife and, rather bizarrely, my American 8-month-old son as well.
Is it bizarre to have an 8-month-old, or is it bizarre to have an 8-month-old who is being raised in America?
No, it's bizarre to go to London and go to Heathrow, and we go up as a family to border control, and he has an American passport going into, the UK, which is where I'm from, but and he doesn't have, he'll get a British passport, he doesn't have one yet. So that was just kind of a funny moment. And of course, he can't, he doesn't talk yet. So it's going to be, once I start getting the, dad, all this kind of stuff, that's going to be a shock as well.
Well, congratulations on having an 8-month-old. That in and of itself can be a very life-changing, weird experience. So, but much to talk about here. Do you have a copy of the book that you can hold up for us? I want people to see the cover. We had a picture of it before, but I always like it when the author can hold it. There it is. It's reversed, but I hidden. So you guys know what it is that you're looking for.
It's just, I'm not sure how to magically unreverse it unless I sort of spin it upside down.
And we have a picture of it somewhere too. But I like it when an author can hold up a picture of the book. Congratulations on this. So let's talk a little bit about the book, what people will find in it, and why this was a thing that you felt you needed to write.
Yeah, and I have to give you a bit of my story, really, because I think the book very much came from that journey. So I'd actually had a traumatic brain injury about 15 years ago or so. That meant I was out of work for a while. I eventually went back to work full time, found myself working for a CEO in the tech industry. And rather to my surprise, got very involved in the world of people in business. How do we hire people? How do we hire great people? How do we make sure we don't just hire people who think and look the same? So I got involved in diversity and strategic diverse recruitment, specifically building apprenticeship programs in London for disadvantaged folks, young people in London to get into tech jobs. And it was through that I started talking to some autistic family members about potential opportunities to help build that education to employment bridge within the neurodiversity space. That wasn't a term that I'd heard at that point, but it was something that resonated with me because I'd had the accident and I had some traits as a result of the accident, sensory sensitivity and needing to manage my own workspace and some short-term memory issues and so on that made me sort of understand, I think, that field a little bit more than I might have otherwise. So that was really the genesis for my company, Uptimize. And our purpose is to educate employers about neurodiversity, to make sure that they are in a position to embrace and leverage different types of thinkers. And that journey was the basis for the book, because I think it was the realizations and the experiences I had along that journey that was something that I wanted to share with the world, whether it was the talent that's being marginalized and really the missed opportunity here for businesses to get stronger by embracing people who think differently, and obviously the consequent social impact of not doing that. The fact that we've seen pretty clearly that organizations don't hire the best people because their hiring processes marginalize and exclude people who might have neurodivergent traits. The excitement and energy we've seen when we've trained organizations, and we've seen people really quite emotional about receiving what we call neuroinclusion training, saying, I'm in tears because this just means so much for me and I didn't think the day would come. But also managers saying, I was a cynic, I didn't know what this had to do with me. And this is the most profound thing I've heard in leadership for 20 years, because I'm suddenly thinking about the fact that my team all has a different brain. So there was just so much I wanted to share with the world, beyond our community. And 3 years ago, decided to start the journey of writing a book, and it came out this week.
Well, and congratulations on that. And it's a book that we all need. You say that neuroinclusion is on the rise. And I want to talk with that because I think you're right. But I want to talk a little bit about, because it seems like every company in the world right now has a diversity, equity, and inclusion division. And we've heard from some of the top CEOs in the last 2 years that this is the top issue facing CEOs. So great. But the problem that I find, and I want you to talk about this, is even though we are seeing this uptick and we're seeing, 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper did a whole piece on this and how companies are starting to do this. But when I find that I'm talking to somebody about their diversity, equity, and inclusion division, they're talking about race and ethnicity, and they have forgotten the special needs community. And it's almost like it's an asterisk at the end of it, and that they haven't been keyed into, and I'm frustrated by it. So tell me what you see, because you're working in this field.
Yeah, I think that has deep roots, because diversity, equity, and inclusion, if we want to call it that, DEI, that really started in the 1960s. And there were businesses in the 1970s being fined for, not making steps to be inclusive. But in our case, the term neurodiversity didn't emerge till the late 90s. So in a sense, businesses and society are just a bit behind here. What's happened, what we've seen, is that you had some organizations in the mid 2010s decide to do what they thought of as disability hiring programs. So the idea is, programs to hire people we wouldn't otherwise hire, and decided to focus those specifically on really autistic tech talent. That was the initial focus. And of course, that got a lot of press coverage, because this was really the first time that some of these big famous employers were saying, we actively, specifically want neurodivergent skills. But what happened, not surprisingly in a way, right? What happened was that in these organizations, as they started talking about neurodiversity, all sorts of people started disclosing and saying, hey, what about me? I'm already here and I'm neurodivergent, and I don't have the support that I need. And so what's been so wonderful the last few years, not in every company, but in some, and in some big ones, you've seen really the rise, and it's very recent, just the last 2 or 3 years, of groups of advocates and allies within organizations coming together and actually being a voice for the neurodivergent community within an organization, and doing it constructively and saying, look, we're here, we want to make the organization more neuro-inclusive. And we can help. And the best organizations have been embracing that support. And I think what we've seen, on a positive note, is where organizations have the business leaders understanding that diversity and inclusion is impactful, where they empower neurodivergent people within the organization, and where they use an organization like our company, where this is our day job and we work every day to build solutions to help organizations become more neuro-inclusive, that good things happen. Now, of course, we can also look at the flip side of that, which is saying that in a majority of the economy at the moment, those things aren't yet happening. And our job really, and I hope through the book and our work at the company, is to start broadening that, so that more and more people and organizations can enjoy the benefits of greater neuro-inclusivity.
A story that I can share, which was very eye-opening to me, about 5 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be going on a trip to was it Johnson or Kennedy? The one that's in the aerospace site, NASA site that's in Houston. And I was going there with Dr. Temple Grandin for a whole day of stuff, interacting with astronauts and with NASA, Temple taking the tour, and I was going to be covering it and filming it. Okay, so during the day, one of the things that they had asked her in advance was, would you be willing to do a little talk for some of the employees here at NASA? And she said yes. And they said, we have these two different halls that we use for this kind of thing. We think the smaller one would be appropriate for you, and it seats like 100 people. And she said, no. What's the bigger one? And they said, oh, that one seats about 1,500. It's so big, it would be hard to fill it. It would be almost everybody who works here. We don't think that that's a good idea. She said, we're gonna need that, and we're gonna, like, do you have a way that you can cover it in other rooms if we have overflow? And they kind of didn't think that that was gonna be necessary. But she filled the place. It was standing room only. There were people trying to get in from outside. And while she was speaking, she said, I'm just curious, how many of you feel that, you know, either you're on the spectrum or in some way related yourself? So many people raised their hands. And then it was, how many of you have a family member or a loved one? Everyone raised their hands. And I watched the NASA people go, I don't think we noticed how many people that would identified in this realm before. And I've seen them make some changes as a result of it. There's an in-house support group. You know, I don't know if I'm allowed to be saying all that, but I thought it was really interesting because NASA didn't know how big of a part of their population this was. And I watched them discover it. It was sort of a very woo moment. So, you know, as more people come forward, we've learned how many people do consider themselves neurodiverse. And I think that has been good, but we've got a ways to go. Talk to us about what you're doing with Uptimize, and if there's somebody who works at a company or they themselves are a CEO of a company, what you do for them that help and why they need you. They may not even know that they need you. Talk to us.
Yeah. Well, we always start with the fact that humans as a whole are neurodiverse as a species. We don't all have the same brain. I love the quote. I think it's Thomas Armstrong who says, you know, you can't sort of go to a museum and see, you know, the normal brain in a jar because it doesn't exist. And that's the reality. And of course, you know, neurodivergent people have their own brains, you know, within that wider reality. What that means for an organization then is it means that any interaction at work, whether it's an interview, whether it's a conversation with your boss, whether it's a meeting, a sales presentation, all of those interactions take place between people who have different brains and consequently different experiences of the world, different preferences when it comes to communicating, problem solving, and so on. So to me, the best argument for neuroinclusion is that it's that people are an organization's most expensive asset. The tool that they're all bringing to work every day is their brain. If we don't try to recognize and optimize for the fact that everybody has a different one, then we are going to create places or maintain places where a good chunk of people feel uncomfortable, excluded, misunderstood, where people feel like they can't do their best work, they feel they can't be themselves, where we lose talent to places that are more inclusive, where we don't collaborate to our best. We miss out on talent when we hire, and we don't enjoy the full innovative capacity of this kind of diversity of thought unleashed. So to me, you know, that's the problem. I think it's a really strong problem that should be any leader's focus. If you look at what leaders care about these days, it's, again, how do we find talent? How do we keep them around? How do we innovate? And so on. So it all links together. I think what we do at Uptimize and what people will get in the book is start to give people a better appreciation of this neurodiverse reality. What does that mean for you as an individual? What does that mean for you as an organization? Why are we talking about it now? And then just quickly trying to give you, whoever you are, a leader, a colleague, whether you're neurodivergent, neurotypical, some strategies for working in a team, managing, recruiting, whatever it is, that you can immediately take away.
You talk about what are some red flags for when somebody is being neuro-inclusive versus neuro-exclusive. I kind of want the Jeff Foxworthy of, you might be neuro-inclusive if, what are some signs that someone is or is not being neuro-inclusive?
Well, I think it's talking about it, actually, and that sounds a bit trite, but if we're starting from a position where most people aren't talking about this, whether it's an organization or whether it's an individual, I think if we change that, that's the first step to true neuroinclusivity. So, for example, we've heard from our focus groups, most times they go to a careers website, they'll see an organization, to your point earlier, right? They'll see an organization talking about diversity. They won't see anything about welcoming different kinds of thinkers. So they immediately think that, does this place really understand, really want people like me? So by changing that, by talking about it in the recruitment process, by leaders talking about neurodiversity and saying, look, we're not experts, but we get that this is important. We have a neurodiverse workforce. This is a journey we want to go on. We want you to be part of this, but it's something we're really committed to. I think that's fantastic. And then at an individual level as well, and let's take an example, for example, a manager or a colleague, this manager or colleague, whoever they are, has their own thinking style, right? Whether or not they're neurodivergent, whether or not they've had a diagnosis, whether or not they want to share their identity. But that's something that they can surface with others. And so they could say, your manager, for example, rather than giving everybody in their team instructions in the same way, could say, look, the way I like to communicate is via instant message or in person. I know that's probably not how you all like to communicate, and actually understand with each direct report, how do they like to receive instructions. You can have these conversations. That is a conversation about neurodiversity. Doesn't need to be a conversation about autism or a conversation about dyslexia. It's a conversation about the fact that we all think differently. Same thing with how do we want to organize our work? How do we want to come together and do a strategy meeting? Anybody can lead those conversations by highlighting their preferences, but being open to the fact that everybody else has theirs as well.
And you feel that it's not only something that companies should do, it's to their detriment if they don't.
Yes, hugely. I think this is one of the misconceptions we face, which is that I think organizations, I call it the neutral starting point fallacy. I think organizations look at wherever they are. So here we are in April 2023. I think they think, okay, that's sort of zero, and we want to get better, we don't want to get worse. I think, in fact, if you look at the experiences of neurodivergent people in the workforce and the prevalence of neurodivergence, then clearly most organizations are suboptimal places to work. Most organizations are doing a poor job of attracting and retaining talent that thinks in different ways. So we really try to highlight that fact and make organizations see this not just as important, but as urgent as well.
And I'd like to get one last question into the book. If there was one takeaway from your book that readers could take, what would the takeaway be?
Well, I'm afraid it's going to be a bit repetitive, but I do think it's worth laboring the point. I think it's the sort of, if I can kind of fuse the two, I think it's the reality of neurodiversity within, again, any organization, any team, any candidate pool, whatever it is, on the one hand, and then the action to start recognizing that and to start paying attention to that in your daily work. I think if if that's something that we all start to do, good things happen.
Yeah. Amen to that. So the book is available now. It's called A Hidden Force, and there's a subtitle too that's a little bit longer. What's the subtitle?
Unlocking the potential of neurodiversity at work.
There we go. And it's available in all major booksellers today, so people can get that and enjoy that. And we think it's really important that what you're doing, and we're so glad that you stopped in to talk with us about it.
Thank you so much for having me.